Oh boy, this happened. Today the Russian Senator Valentina Matvienko said that Moscow wants to have negotiations with Ukraine and sign a peace treaty. Does this mean that this war might be over in the nearest future? What are her reasons for this statement? Will this actually happen? And these are the questions that we'll be talking about in today's video. What's up, investors, Zoltan Darabos and people of Reddit, it's the Russian Dude, and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Wednesday, June 1st. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. Happy first day of the summer, Johnny Depp won in court, what a day to be alive. Alright, so to be honest, this came out of nowhere, but it did happen. And what happened is that the Russian Senator Valentina Matvienko said that Russia wants to start peaceful negotiations with Ukraine and eventually sign a peace treaty. Just so you know, Valentina Matvienko is not some kind of third-grade politician. In fact, she is the chairwoman of the Federation Council and she is the ex-governor of the city of St. Petersburg, which basically means she is one of the top higher government officials of Russia. So whenever she says things like this, it should definitely get our attention. In my personal understanding, the reason for this statement it is because the army of Russia is experiencing significant difficulties advancing on Ukraine. If you remember in the beginning, the goal of this special military operation was to prevent Ukraine from joining the NATO and also to denazify Ukraine. And because of this, Russia invaded simultaneously from the north, east and south of the country. One of the first regions to be liberated was the north of Ukraine. And then when Ukrainian forces were able to sink the Russian Navy flagship Moskva, the advancement in the south of the country became very hard as well. So because of this, later on, Russia switched their main goal just to simply liberating the region of Donbass and denazifying the city of Mariupol. The first goal of denazifying the city of Mariupol was relatively successful from Russian side because they were able to take control over the entire city territory. And if you remember, the last bastion of defense in this city was the territory of Azovstal factory. But eventually the remaining soldiers received the order from the Ukrainian higher government officials that they can lay down their weapons and basically give up and save their lives. As a result, Russia took these soldiers as their prisoners of war and they're saying that they'll be prosecuting them as Nazis. Which basically means in case this idea of Russia is successful, Russia will finally be able to announce some kind of victory. I am imagining this as following. Putin will be broadcasting with his favorite green screen in the background and he will say something like this: "Congratulations, fellow citizens, we were able to denazify Ukraine. And here is the proof. Just look at these captured Ukrainian Nazis who are going to spend lives in jail." So this was the first, let's say so, accomplished goal of Russia. And now the next goal of Russia, which they're focusing at this very moment the most, is to liberate the Donbass region. But to be honest, recently this only switched to liberating the Lugansk region. And yesterday it was reported that Russian army was able to take control over the city of Severodonetsk, which is just one of the major cities in Lugansk territory. The next goal of Russia will be to capture the city of Lysychansk, which is geographically higher than Severodonetsk. And because of this, it is expected that capturing this city will be much harder than Severodonetsk. For this reason, it is still uncertain whether Russia will succeed in this region. But at the same time, we are seeing that Russia is relocating the majority of its forces all over from Ukraine just to this small region of Lugansk, which basically means that now the rest of Ukraine has much fewer Russian soldiers, which makes the counterattacks of Ukrainians much easier. As a result, what we might see is that somehow Russia will be able to liberate this Lugansk region. And as a result, Russia might pronounce its total victory and success of special military operation Ukraine. And maybe this is just one of these reasons why Valentina Matvienko made this statement about the peace treaty with Ukraine. Because let's say so, Russia will announce its undeniable victory in Ukraine, and that is why now it's time to sign a peace treaty. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please make sure to check the link in the description if you wish to receive additional content such as daily Zoom calls and Q&A sessions. All the proceeds will be donated to Ukraine at the end of each month. Thanks so much, and let's continue. But at the same time, I think there might be a second reason why Valentina Matvienko said this. If you remember, America already signed a Land-Lease Act to support Ukraine, which basically means that now the states will be able to send weapons to Ukraine much faster and much cheaper. And at this very moment, if you might remember, Ukraine is at the stage of accumulating offensive weapons. And there have been several statements, including by the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich himself, is that Ukraine is getting ready to launch counteroffensive somewhere in the middle of this summer. And in order to do this, they need to have enough offensive weapons. So in my own opinion, the second reason why would Valentina Matvienko want to sign a peace treaty with Ukraine, it is because Russia does not want to continue the war after Ukraine gets all these weapons. Because let's be honest, Russia is already experiencing big difficulties in advancing as it is right now. So imagine what will happen once Ukraine gets all these weapons. So long story short, most likely Russia wants to end this war as quickly as possible because at this very moment they have some kind of victory to present to its civilians. So will this peace treaty actually happen? To be honest, since Valentina Matvienko is pretty high government official of Russia, it potentially can happen. Especially because of the reasons I basically just announced. And does this mean that the war can be over in the nearest future? Well, I sincerely hope that the actual physical war with the use of weapons and deaths of people from both sides will end in the nearest future, but unfortunately looks like that political and economic and diplomatic war against Russia will continue. Especially because Russia will be constantly claiming that we liberated the regions of Donbass and the city of Mariupol. That is why these are our territories now, which obviously will not be recognized by Ukraine or anywhere else in the world. Welcome to another episode of ridiculous Russian propaganda. And today we are starting with Rosgvardia, which is basically the internal military forces of Russia, giving these toys to Russian kids. With the only one big problem is that these toys are actually military vehicles that are used to detain protesters in Russia. So the idea behind this is obviously to teach kids that in case you're gonna be protesting in the future, you'll be prosecuted and put to jail. So don't even think about doing this. Instead, think about joining the military forces of Russia. And in return, we can give you these sticks or batons, I guess how they're called, so you can hit your fellow civilians. What a time to be a kid in Russia, eh? The next episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda touches our favorite propagandist of Russia, Vladimir Solovyov. So basically he was having this interview with an Italian journalist, and obviously he was blaming Italy that they were Nazis and they were supporting Hitler in the Second World War. But then this Italian journalist asked Vladimir Solovyov the question, if you hate the country so much, why did you buy 4-wheelers in our country? And the response of Vladimir Solovyov was straight to the point. Whenever I was buying them, you are not Nazis and you are still friends of Russia. That's why it doesn't count. Russian political double standards, baby. And the final episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda for today is this article from one of the main propagandistic medias of Russia called TASS. So the article was basically about the army of Ukraine using these multiple rocket launch systems called Grad to bomb the cities in Donetsk region. Which might sound like typical Russian propaganda until you zoom in on this picture that they used in their headline. And I mean, for a regular person this might not sound like anything extraordinary, and I still don't understand what's wrong with this picture. Today, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, its forces has started its training for its nuclear forces. At this very moment, approximately 100 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile systems called YARS, as well as 1,000 people of personnel are engaged in this training. In my personal opinion, this is just yet another show of force from Russia to the Western countries. Because if you remember, in the past, Russia was doing multiple statements about that it is ready to use nuclear weapons. But in reality, none of these threats came to life. And in addition to that, several Russian officials were also constantly contradicting their partners. Which basically means that some politicians were always saying Russia will definitely use nuclear weapons and will destroy every single country on the West, while other politicians were saying Russia will definitely never use nuclear weapons because this will lead to a world catastrophe. Russian military commander and an FSB officer, Igor Girkin, says that Russia needs to pull way more soldiers from its reserve if they want to have this successful liberation of Donbass region. Which is just yet one more confirmation is that Russia is severely struggling in its goal to liberate Ukraine. And at the same time, he wants to call people from the reserve and to mobilize them as quick as possible. And what is the result of this action is that Russia will have many people who are completely untrained and are unprepared for this war. Which basically means that you are right, Russia will have way more losses trying to advance with its goals. Also, according to him, the next goal of Russian army in this region is to capture the city of Lysychansk, which is the neighboring city of the city of Severodonetsk, which Russia was able to successfully capture yesterday. Capturing Lysychansk at the same time will give Russia increased chances at liberating Luhansk region, which is at this very moment is the top priority for Russian army. On this map presented to us by the Defense Intelligence of the United Kingdom, we can see the current condition of the war as of June 1st. And as always, the main combat actions are happening in the east and south of the country. Like mentioned previously, the main goal of Russia at this very moment is to capture the cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. And doing so will significantly increase chances of Russia to gain control over Lugansk region. But it has been reported that in order to achieve success in this region, Russia was reallocating the majority of its forces from around the country to just the east of Ukraine. And because of this, the presence of Russian forces in south of the country decreased significantly. As a result, Ukraine was able to launch several successful counterattacks, especially in Kherson region. So as a result, we have the following outcome. Russia might be able to capture the Luhansk region, but at the same time Ukraine will be most likely able to liberate the south of the country. Today, the United States of America is getting ready to send another support package to Ukraine worth of approximately $700 million. And this package also includes high mobility artillery rocket systems called HIMARS, which allows to send missiles up to 300 kilometers. But America also mentioned that they limited the capabilities of these systems only up to 80 kilometers. And the reason for this is because they don't want Ukrainians to use these missiles on the territory of Russia. But in response to that, couple of days ago, Zelensky himself said that Ukraine is not planning to engage in any combat actions on the territory of Russia. He said that at this very moment the war is only on the territory of Ukraine and he is not planning to bring it outside of his own country. And the reason why would America still limit the distance of their rocket systems, it is because they don't want to have this kind of direct involvement in this conflict. Because in the past Russia was making several statements that in case Western weapons used by Ukrainians on the territory of Russia, Russia will be considering these Western countries as a legitimate military targets. Which basically means that neither of the countries involved in these conflicts do not want to include even more countries. Today, the governor of St. Petersburg, Alexander Beglov, and infiltrator of Russia in Mariupol, Konstantin Ivashchenko, signed a deal which makes these two cities to be so-called brotherly cities. What this means, first of all, is that the budget of St. Petersburg can now also be used in the post-war reconstruction of Mariupol, which is basically like the tax rubles of regular Russians will be used to reconstruct Ukrainian city of Mariupol. And I mean, on the one hand, it is good because the city can hopefully be reconstructed in the nearest future. But on the other hand, all this money that will be transferred from the budget of St. Petersburg into Mariupol, most of it will be lost along the way. Simply because this is how Russian oligarchs become oligarchs. And if you remember, in the past I was already making a news report about this article, is that regular Russians will be paying for the reconstruction of Ukraine. And already then I was already mentioning that most likely the majority of this taxpayers' money will unfortunately end up in the pockets of Russian oligarchs. Thank you so much for your attention, check the link in the description, stay safe and see you tomorrow.